My name is Deepshika and I represent Speakin. And here we are welcoming one of the most beautiful panelists or speakers that we've had on the Speakin webinars so far. Please welcome Ms. Radhika Gupta. Thank you so much, Radhika, for joining us today. Such a pleasure and an absolute honor to be talking to you. I was telling Radhika a little while earlier that I have my two girls as well, and I was showing everything about Radhika in the past 1 week to my daughters, setting a very high benchmark for them to look up to. So thank you, Radhika, for joining us. And would you like to start with a very quick introduction of your very, very illustrious journey that you've taken?
Oh God, quick, thank you so much for having me. Always a delight to do these kind of things, especially it's a good way to end a Friday evening, light way to end a Friday evening. What do I tell you about myself? I am an working girl like many of us are, trying to manage home and work and some dreams. I have a slightly twisted background as a kid because I grew up, I'm the daughter of an Indian diplomat, very close to my identity. Grew up 6 countries, 4 continents, born in Pakistan and then lived in Africa for quite some time, Nigeria, Zambia. Also went to high school in Italy and then moved to the US and worked there, saw 2008 financial crisis and came back to India in 2009 to set up a business. Was young and 24 and wanted to do something on my own, didn't think it through, but did that, sold the business to an organization called Edelweiss Financial Services. And now I'm the CEO of their mutual fund business. I've been the CEO for the last 3 years. And that's essentially me.
Fantastic. So before we lash on to some of the points that you mentioned, coming back in right after the last recession that we've seen financially, and coming back to India at nearly the peak of your career alongside a few of your colleagues. We'll delve a little deeper into that as we move forward, and also the mutual funds space itself. But take us through your early years, Radhika, entering the workforce. How was that experience? How did your initial successes or challenges come about, and how did you overcome them to becoming one of the youngest leaders this country has seen?
So early years are actually, I think, the more interesting ones, because for many of us, and I guess in my generation also, I don't come from a background where parents have been in corporate India or corporate US. So I started my career graduating from Wharton, and I was actually fairly clueless about what the world was ahead of me. I mean, I've had classmates who joined college who were very clear about what they wanted to do, and that, when I graduate, I want to join Morgan Stanley investment banking in LA doing this. And I was like, I don't even know what Morgan Stanley is. And I think that comes from the fact that, one doesn't come from a corporate background. So I think the early years, I actually did a bunch of stuff. So I did my first 2 internships at Microsoft. So that was technology. And then I joined McKinsey. I think that story is somewhat documented, but a pretty hard struggle to get into management consulting despite being a class topper. I mean, in the early years, the smaller things get to you. Like, I think I was a pretty bad interviewer in my very, very early years. I mean, obvious lack of self-confidence, just about how one looks and about, being an introvert. And I think that all, shows up in your conversations and interviews. So I think I was a terrible interviewer, I have to say, and that didn't serve me well. But I did a year and a half at McKinsey and a few years on Wall Street. And it really was about finding my own space and figuring out what I liked and what I wasn't good at. What I always tell young people is that, in your early years, I think you're taught in college to associate yourself with great brands now, whether it's Wharton or McKinsey or anything else or Wall Street. But it's also important not just to collect degrees on your resume, but to collect interesting experiences. I always say that if there was one advice I would give my younger 21-year-old self, it would be to chase experiences, because at that stage, you really just want to learn and assimilate the most that you can. And you want to have different kinds of experiences. I mean, I think the one thing I like about my resume is that over the last 15 years of WorkX, there's been India experience, and then there's been US experience. There has been startup experience and mid-sized company experience and larger company experience. There's been public sector and private sector. So I think collecting different kinds of experiences, even within the same domain, in my view, was very, very powerful. And that's kind of what my early years taught me.
Mm, interesting. So if I and that's very interesting point. Perhaps still relevant in a lot of ways. You know, when I went to my B school, or you know, all this or everybody who comes out of a B school, the first preference is management consulting, right? Why do you think is management consulting such a preferred option when you actually see there are a lot of people who just probably, you know, exit in the very first few years, and then of course they end up making a much bigger taking a much bigger leap and much bigger risks. So why is management consulting such a coveted position right after school?
It's not just management consulting, it's actually management consulting and financial services both. And you're right. I mean, these are clam jobs out of business school. Now, the fact is that when you're recruiting for a job on a business school campus, nobody tells you, nobody has any idea what they're doing. I am convinced, and I love the financial services profession. I mean, I've been in this industry for 15 years. I'm very grateful for it. But I don't think people join it out of love. I think people join it for the glamour and the money, to be very honest. And I don't think a lot of people survive, because in any industry, if you don't like what you're doing, money can't carry you through. I mean, I've seen that with my own classmates. A lot of the people who join financial services don't end up actually hanging out in financial services for a very long time. I think management consulting people join because it's a generalist profession, one, and it is a launchpad for many other things. Now, what I loved about my experience at McKinsey is more than the work, the kind of people that I got to interact with. So I think that's very valuable. And in management consulting, I think you grow up very fast. So, you're 21, 22, and you're talking to CEOs or department heads, etc., and you get an access and exposure, and I think it shapes you in a way, perhaps very young in your career. So, I mean, management consulting is supposed to be the start to a CEO journey, but I don't think that's true. I think rise to leadership regardless of how you choose to start your path. But I do agree, there's a lot of glamour associated with these professions, and I have to dispel the notion of glamour. After I joined McKinsey, and I thought, I'm going to be sitting in a boardroom designing strategy, and it's going to be all white smoke and stuff. My first client was the equivalent of Chroma in the US, and it was in Texas, and it was an electronic retailer going bankrupt. And we were on a cost cutting project. And if anyone knows electronic retail, then the busiest times for a retailer are actually the weekend. So we worked all weekends, all holidays. Like Thanksgiving is the biggest day for an electronic retailer, and हमको Monday को छुट्टी मिलती थी. I was like, Monday की छुट्टी का क्या point है यार? अभी I come back from Texas to New York on Monday, and I'm like, hi to my friends, let's go meet, and everybody is back to work. And I used to work 18 hours a day from 5 in the morning when the warehouse opened till 10 at night when the cash register closed, following people around and documenting what people were doing. That was my first job. And while I'm very grateful for the McKinsey experience, I would just say that your first job is not the glamour that business school presents it to you.
So, if I were to look at, the current situation, the way the economic implication of what is happening right now is panning out, there'll be a lot of, complete tectonic shifts in the hiring and the manpower space. So, if you were talking, and a lot has been talked about the millennials, the way they treat a career, their definition of a career, and resigning at the drop of a hat, or taking whims and fancies, etc. What would be your, say, 3 recommendations to a 22-year-old you at this situation, at this juncture? If you were 22, what would be your 3 recommendations who's entering into the workforce?
I think this is a really nice question, Deepshika. And I'm also someone who manages millennials. And it's something, and I'm going to answer these sort of on the fly, but it's something I grapple with and I've been thinking a lot about. And I think millennials are super smart. So I don't want to sound dismissive in any way. I think the first thing that you have to keep in mind is that you can't constantly be switching jobs. And you see that with millennials a lot. I mean, you have a bad 6-month period, your boss says something, you have one bad year of compensation, I'm looking for a job switch. I want to tell you something that I think the head of Goldman Sachs India told me, is that to have a long, sustainable career, a rock star, out of the words career, you almost need to go through prolonged periods of hell. Prolonged periods of hell is the word. And I think that is it. You have to give time to the organization. So that will be my first advice to millennials. My second advice would be to them is that, you have to control what you can control and constantly keep upgrading yourself. Now, this is not just advice to millennials, it's advice to everybody. But you are not perfect on day one. So if your boss is not perfect, please remember you're also not a perfect boss. There are good things about you, there are bad things about you. And now the bad things about you, I'll give you my own experience. Shortly before I became CEO, I had run a successful business, but I did realize I had no people management experience because my team size was 7 people. I mean, today I manage 200. Find out what those gaps in your resume are. They could be gaps just because you never had the opportunity, and now work on those gaps. Never stop being a student. So if your gap is public speaking, you're not too old to learn public speaking. You can learn it at the age of 30 or 40. You can definitely learn it at the age of 22. If your gap is people management, and there will be a time, then ask for those opportunities. But constantly keep working on yourself, I think, is my second advice.
Fantastic.
And I think the third one is that, listen, great careers are not built in an instance, and they are not all glamour. Every job, including the job at the top of the totem pole and at the bottom of the totem pole, even though I don't believe this totem pole thing, has a fairly, so I get told my job is fairly glamorous, especially the MFCEO role, because it's very public and you get to do fun things like this and go on TV and you do all that stuff. But there is an equally unglamorous side to that job that is tough, and there's probably a day a month where you feel like quitting and giving it all up. And those days are also a reality. So it is about living through those days. So balance the glamour that business school tells you with the reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, so great. I mean, now let's, that takes me to my leading phase of the discussion, Radhika. You're such a young leader who has shown massive agility um, through different phases of transitioning your business, you're being an entrepreneur, and then transitioning into a leader of such a massive organization. From the 200 crores to the 20,000 crore fund. So that journey, take us through that journey. Take us through some of the lessons that you would give to organizations today, which would be timeless, whether it comes to whether it is about people, business organizations, and then of course I'll come to a larger point of scale. How you moved from one step to the other. Did you take baby steps? Did you take big risks? What did you do? So let's hear from you on maybe about 3 to 4 different lessons that you would share with the leaders of today.
That's it. And my journey, I mean, it's in two parts. There's an entrepreneurial journey of Forefront Capital Management, which was, I would say, the 25 lakh to 200 crore journey. And then there's a larger journey at Edelweiss that has been now what, 20, 30,000 crores or wherever we are. And I do, I want to take to the last thing you said, that for me, every journey, the greatest journey is a step-by-step journey. I have a very firm belief that you don't go from 1 to 100 in life. You can dream of, so you should always dream. So like right now, my dream is 3 lakh crores. Okay. So that's the dream. I'm sitting at 30,000 crores. So there's a dream that is 10 times. And 3 years ago, we were probably 4,000 crores. So it was a really big dream. So it's important to have big dreams, because if you don't have big dreams, then you're not going to get anywhere, right? But you also have to plan in shorter chunks. So I always say that you don't go from 1 to 100. You go from 1 to 2. And then at 2, you get a little more confident and you have the ability to go to 5. And at 5, you are able to plan for 10 and 15. And in that journey, you acquire the wisdom. By the time you're at 15, 20, you can plan for 50. And that's how you get from 50 to 100. So 1 to 100 is a gradual journey. And I think that is super important. That's what I've always found. So while there's a lot of strategic planning, etc., that happens, I think a lot of life is about ground execution. I believe in a country like India, so much is achieved just by execution. I was just having a conversation with my head of HR, and he was complimenting us for some of the very good work we've done on the marketing front in the lockdown. And he said, for you guys, it's actually sometimes just the ability to get the email out and execute the event on time and have the speaker. And sometimes it may not be perfect. It's 85% there, but you put a plank on the ground. And then the next time you execute something, 85 becomes 95% perfect and you're at 99. But
Mine
that,
is, yes.
that ability to execute in India is grossly underrated because you see so many people with ideas. And I think India is just so much about ground up execution. I mean, I didn't put out four things, but that's my number one learning over this. And it doesn't matter whether you're running a 25 lakh business or a 200 crore business.
So let me ask you a leading question on that, Radhika. I mean, being such a young CEO, I'm sure you've taken a lot of steps very, very fast because to get to that level must have taken a bunch of steps. Radhika, one more question. When you talk about execution, and I see that, I mean, being an entrepreneur myself, I see that execution, I mean, as it is said, no, we have a lot of gyanis. You know, ज्ञान बहुत है,
ज्ञान बहुत देने पड़े हैं यार इंडिया
काम
में।
करने वाले कम है।
हाँ, वो ऊपर बैठ के ज्ञान तो बहुत सारे लोग देते हैं लेकिन किसी को कहो जाके काम करे तो कोई हाथ नहीं खड़ा करता, वो तो दैट इज।
Exactly. So how do you manage that problem? How do you manage that challenge when you get execution done?
So I have believed that leadership is about being very hands-on, and I think execution is a culture that comes from the top. I'll give you an example of something that's concrete, and that's a large-scale project. One of the largest bets in our journey, we raised about 12,000 crores last year through Bharat Bond, which was a government of India initiative. Obviously, it's a career highlight for me. And people have told us that Bharat Bond was product designing brilliance and this and that and all. And so it's hard execution, yeah. I mean, if I had to tell you, I took 50 flights to Delhi last year myself. Not 50 trips, 100 flights to Delhi myself. We prepared 700 documents to get this product through the cabinet ministry. And I think that is ground up execution. I do believe ground up execution starts with me. So I've seen during times of Bharat Bond, when my team was stuck, I was ready to jump in. Now, I don't jump in for day-to-day sales or regular stuff, but if we're leading a really big project that has to get executed in time, then I have to jump in. And if my team knows I'm committed to execution, I'll tell you the whole system will be committed to execution. I mean, it was super interesting. Bharat Bond needed the approval from cabinet, the union cabinet to be launched. And it also couldn't be launched towards the end of December because of the Christmas New Year period. And we were supposed to get cabinet approval sometime in mid-November. And then that kept getting delayed. And it was like one day they told us we'll get it on 4th December, but you still should try and launch it. And we had, I mean, Christmas holidays start like 18th. So we're like, if we get approval on 4th, will we be able to take a fresh product to market in a few days? But we could because we planned it so well. And I think that is ground up execution. So I think most things in India are 20% good ideas and 80% ground up execution. And leadership is a contact sport. I mean, it is fought in the battlefield. It is not fought in the boardroom.
I love that. Leadership is a contact sport. Yes, it is. Absolutely, it is. So I'll ask you another leading question. You know, because this is becoming leadership's biggest challenge today. How do you drive your people? But driving also begins with hiring the right people. So when you built your 7-member team at one point of time, you have a 200-member team currently. What do you look for in people, especially people who would impact, who will have the maximum impact, are sitting at the top of the ladder?
So I have to tell you, it was tough hiring in a startup. It was even tougher hiring in my role as CEO because we were like a 30s. There are about 45 mutual fund companies in India. When I took over, we were 36th ranked. And I remember we were supposed to hire for these sales managers in Bombay. So I went to MCA at that point in time, and my HR told me all these interviews have been set up. So I go sit in MCA. I'm waiting. These candidates don't show up. They just don't show up. Like, I'm supposed to be the CEO here, and I'm trying to hire a live sales manager in Bombay. And okay, one candidate doesn't show up, so you think, chalo, theek hai, the second guy doesn't show up. You realize that nobody wants to work with you because of the size of the business you manage. And I don't come from the MF industry, so nobody knew who I was. Now, 3 years later, I have confidence that I can hire anybody I want to. But so I think hiring it's a lot about selling your story. In fact, I have always said in the first interview, it is very two-way. I'm selling the story as much as they are selling who they are. I mean, I think it's a two-way conversation even now. Obviously, now people show up for interviews, so they're much nicer. I look for two things in people. I have been told I'm the easiest person to interview with. I mean, my HR tells me this because essentially I start my interview. I don't ask anything technical because I assume if you've come to talk to me, my team has already interviewed you and you are technically qualified. So I ask one question, which is tell me about yourself. And that's my opening question. And your whole interview could be tell me about yourself. Now, it is a very leading question, but I feel in that single question, I can gauge nearly everything about a person. I can gauge your ability to tell a story, your ability to present yourself in front of me. I can gauge your energy, I can gauge your ambition, I can gauge your hunger. I can gauge if you're humble or if you're arrogant. I can a lot of stuff. I can gauge if you are rambling or if you're precise. A lot of stuff comes out in that. So that's been my approach. And I look for two things. I mean, the secret sauce with me is very simple. It's two things. One, I look for tremendous hunger and energy. I have said no to super bright candidates just because I felt they were sleepy. Now I'm an energetic person. I'm told that I want people who are hungry and I want people who are energetic, and that to me is sort of uncompromisable. So I look for that in an interview. I can feel that energy, and in UP they say कि वो आवाज में खनक होनी चाहिए, and I think that for me is very important. And the second is I like people who are not victims of their current circumstances. No matter where you are today, in your head, I think you should think like number one. Because at rank 36 and at rank 16, I think like number one. Now that is important. So you can't be a victim of your current circumstances, and you should be open to change. So you should be open to new ideas. Like I hate people who tell me यार ऐसा ही होता है, इस industry में तो ऐसा ही होता. That to me is like a no, because the world is changing, and even pre-COVID it was changing. But especially if you're working as a young person in a business, you're a challenger. You've got to be audacious. You've got to have something. So that I think to me is very, very important. I mean, someone was asking me on a previous conversation that if I had to pick one word of all in the dictionary, what is my favorite word? And so I thought about it actually. And my favorite word, which is what I look for in people, is chutzpah. Chutzpah, it's a Yiddish word, but it essentially means like this audacious confidence to just go out there and, take over. So that's what I look for in people, chutzpah.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll ask you one leading question. I'll take this point forward. Uh, you mentioned when you interviewed at McKinsey, 85% of your time went into, or rather 85 minutes of your time went into talking about bridge that you used to play with your parents. So in today's world, when you interview, and say if you look at entrepreneurs or new time businesses or business leaders, when they interview, the pressures and the whole, the ecosystem is so driving. So if somebody starts talking about bridge or football, you are doomed. Like, boss, हमारे लिए क्या करोगे? So how do you draw a parallel today, and what would be your message to those who are hiring to look for?
So I think, hiring is a very personal decision. And ultimately, you were taught this in college, but I never believed it. Hiring is about fit. Now, what works for me doesn't have to work for you. I absolutely understand, because if I'm a high energy person, I need a high energy person around me. If I'm not a high energy person, a high energy person around me is going to be draining and miserable. So I don't think hiring the same standards have to apply to everybody. And I think everyone interviews very, very differently. I will tell you though, I have done conversations. I've also been hired. I've been a candidate in the past. I think more and more senior conversations are not interviews. I think they become conversations.
Correct.
And whether those conversations travel to bridge, or whether they travel to cooking, or whether they travel to anything else, I think those conversations are conversations, and the conversations go in any direction that you really take them. So I think hiring is very, very personal, but I really think that as you I mean, no conversation I have had in hiring a person has said, "Chalo, walk me through your resume." I've seen your resume, right? I mean, if in today's digital age, I need someone to walk me through their resume, I mean, the worst answer to tell me about yourself is, I worked here, then I worked here, then I worked here, then I quit this, then I did this, then my father did this. वो तो मुझे तुम्हारा CV पे सारा पता है, मुझे कोई time waste कर रहे हो, right? you have to tell me about the qualities that stand out in you. What are you bringing to me and how those qualities manifest? So one of the things that, and I haven't done too many interviews because I haven't changed jobs very much. But one of the ways that I like to describe my own self in conversations is I'm a child of chaos. I mean, I thrive in chaos. My background is one like that. I moved different countries, and that's been my work career. I've done a lot of changes. I've moved into a lot of different situations, and I've tried to make the best of each one. So that's how I describe myself. So I don't think the self description is also X to Y to Z. I mean, that is my first turn off.
So great. So Radhika, as we approach, the closure of our conversation, I wanted to ask you one very critical question, which is coming in front of all leaders. I think as a leader, it's not just the internal dynamics. It is also external dynamics in your brand as a leader. How the world, the industry perceives you and looks at you, looks up to you. I mean, you've been a leader who's not just limited to Edelweiss or to the MF industry or to the financial industry. Also, there are people outside the industry who are looking up to you and talking to you. And here we are. We found you, stalked you, and got to talk to you today. So, how would you recommend? So, one is that how important, of course, brand is extremely important today for corporate
Yeah.
leaders. How do you build a brand as a corporate leader? And then, and what are the activities that go into it? Is it personal? Is it institutional? How do you build it?
So I find it funny that I'm asked this question because I'm asked more frequently. So it's interesting that you ask because while I'm in a business that's very marketing, etc., savvy, when I was hired into this role, I was told that one of the reasons I would not make it to a CEO role is that I know nothing about marketing and branding. So I find it kind of nice that I'm asked this question, even though I'm not a marketing expert at all. I'll tell you something about, I think personal brand is super important. And I think it's becoming a more important word. We call it personal brand today. In the old days, it was called reputation. And if you don't think personal brand is important, well, reputation was always important. It's now got this tag of personal brand. Um, and I think, something my father taught me as a leader, why is personal brand important? Because you are also an ambassador. My father carried the tag ambassador, Yogesh Gupta, through his career, ambassador of India. He used to say, Bharat ka Rajdoot, I'm the representative of President of India. I mean, that is his role. And I think you are, as a CEO or as a leader, the representative of the organization, good or bad. And the way you conduct yourself will reflect on the organization. If you build a brand that is warm and likable, the positive effects on the organization are immense. I mean, I have experienced that so much. I'll tell you something like Girl with a Broken Neck, which is the video that released 2 years ago. I've got so much personal affection from it, but the brand gets a lot of affection from it. And now we've sort of built a brand also around storytelling and being an honest and young brand. So I think if you can marry your own brand with the brand of the organization, one, it becomes very powerful. Secondly, I think this is an age where it is not difficult to sort of build out your brand. In the old days, branding was a very expensive exercise that was left to corporates. Now, in the age of social and digital media, what do you have to do to build a personal brand? Essentially, you need to stand for something. You need to know what that is. And you need to be able to articulate that well. And you have so many forums. You have blogs, you have Twitter, you have LinkedIn to be able to articulate that. And I think if you can articulate that, you'll find more and more people connect to you. It's a tremendous way to network. I mean, the kind of people I have connected to on social media, there are amazing stories. I just interviewed today someone who's a reasonably famous investor sitting in the US. And I swear I only found him on Twitter, and I sent him a message on Twitter, and he said he had seen my video and he liked me, so he'd be more than happy to do anything for me. This happened solely because I sent the guy a message on Twitter. And I think, I've had job offers come through this way also. So I think personal brand can be incredibly powerful. It's not that hard to build either.
Agree, absolutely. So like you built very, very beautifully. I'll ask you one last leading question and then we will move to taking questions from the audiences, Radhika. You talked about being a warm and likable brand. How do you build that amidst all your leadership pressures? How have you kept such a warm and likable position?
Hopefully likable. But I think the thing to do is be yourself. It's the simplest advice, but my God, it's the easiest thing to do. Because, and being yourself is something that is not tested in good times. It is tested in tough times. Your brand, I was, I heard this, I think Prahlad Kakkar told me this. He said, you're actually not building a brand in good times. In good times, you're just marketing a brand. You're building the brand in bad times. So I'll give you an example. If you're asked a tough question as a leader, how you answer it shapes your personal brand. Can you answer that question with honesty? If you're going through a bad patch as a leader, do you have the confidence to go out and tell your team, listen, I'm going through a bad patch, I need help? Or are you screaming at everyone and grappling with it internally? How you conduct yourself in the bad times, I think, is the best way to communicate your brand. So I think I've tried to be honest, I've tried to be myself. And I've also tried to share, the challenge with the CEO tag is that people look at the tag and think of you as like the suited person or the sari clad person in a corner office that is very inaccessible. I've tried to share a lot of stories. I mean, I'm a huge believer in the power of storytelling. I tried to make me and the brand a lot more real by sharing a lot more stories.
Fantastic. So thank you very much, Radhika, for that. I think time now that we took questions from the audiences. I have Anjali Yadav ask, thank you, Ms. Gupta. It's great listening to you. You started in finance when it was not so favorable for women. Do you feel the situation has improved, and what can we expect in future? Aren't many names.
I don't know if it's improved. I think it should improve. But the fact is that if you look at most industries today, not just finance, with the exception of maybe media and a couple of others, there are very few of us and there are very few of us at the top. Now, I often get asked what you should do to solve for more women in leadership. I don't even think you should try and solve for more women in leadership because that's the output. You have to solve for women not dropping out at the mid level. I do hope it will improve because now I see that in campuses, campus hiring is in many places 50% women. If you can cross the crucial mid stage, I hope it will improve. I do have one advice, since Anjali asked that question, and there's one thing, I manage men and women. There's one thing that I wish to tell everyone who listens to this, and I say it every time I'm asked this: women don't ask enough. Yeah, women need to be ambitious, and we just need to ask. There's this great incident that I have to tell you about. Do you remember Howdy Modi? There was a time when Modi went to visit Trump in Texas. And there was this big program and pomp and circumstance, and everything happened. And Modi and Trump are walking back. Okay. And there's a bunch of folk dancers who had danced for them, and they're both walking back, like hugging each other as they always do. And this line of Indian dancers is there. And after them, there's an 11-year-old boy in white clothes.
Yes.
Now, Modi and Trump walk, and the dancers are looking. Now the boy is 11 and he's like, I have to say, at least 10 years older, younger than these girls. He taps Trump on the shoulder and says, can I have a selfie? And he gets the selfie. And all the women standing in line before him are like, I can't believe he got the selfie. You know why he got the selfie? Well, he got the selfie because he asked. And it is very important to ask. So please ask for that promotion. Please say you want to do more. Please ask for that extra compensation. Please ask.
Fantastic. Lovely example. So the more questions coming in. Arjun asks, what you said you thrive in chaos. How do you develop a mindset that allows you to do that?
With me, it's been a little easier because of the background, Arjun, because my father moved every 3 years. And, one of the things about the foreign service is they don't just move you cities, they move you countries, and you move from very drastic countries. So it's Europe to Africa, Europe to Africa. I tell you the two words that have really helped me, and again, in, the format of a story that from my childhood, because I've also made a lot of career movements. So when I was young and I used to go on these planes and we used to leave one country, we would be at the airport and my brother and I would always be crying, and so would my mother, okay, school chut gaya, or office, we're leaving our friends behind and our school behind. And I would always remember my father boarding the flight to a new country and leaving a country he would never come back to. Like, he never went back to Nigeria or Pakistan, but he would always be smiling. And that was a very distinct visual. And I would ask him why. I think I asked him why when I was a teenager. And he said, वो दौर चला गया, एक नया दौर आएगा. There will be a new school, new friends, etc. And he always used to say, move forward. And he says that even now. And I think move forward is something that I would tell all of you. You know, it is, you have to stop looking at the past because it's not in your control. One of the things that helped me greatly when I moved back from the US is I actually didn't go back to the US for 10 years after I moved back because people kept saying, yeah, you know, you'll regret it. And people ask you these questions, do you regret moving back? Always tell those people you don't regret moving back, even if you do, because there are 10 people who will pull you down and say change is not something that humans like. So they'll tell you, oh, you know, you had it better in the past, etc. Don't make those comparisons. Resist the urge to make comparisons. And the last piece of advice I'll leave you for change, and I think I wrote a thread on social on this also, is, you know, when you move from world one to world two, and I'll give you an example. When I moved from the US to India, someone gave me this advice that, you know, don't be that little kid who moves from the US and says everything in India is wrong. Like it's dirty, the people are this. Respect the new environment you are moving into because you haven't made it here, right? People have, and they've done really, really well here. So don't be cynical about your new world. Embrace your new world, and then it'll embrace you.
Fantastic. So Lauren asks, I think this is pretty much a question that we spoke about, but what story do you look for in a potential candidate you are interviewing? So you talked about, tell me about yourself. What are you looking for?
What story do I look for? I look for an ability to challenge circumstances. I love that. I love someone who was maybe an underdog, but could challenge their circumstances, had persistence, and had resilience. I love stories of people doing things that are new and big thinking in nature, embracing more than their current role. I love stories that you know, say that. I often ask candidates another question beyond tell me about yourself, and I ask them that, you know, what do you want to be a few years down the line? And it's like a very basic question. And you know, when I'm hiring a sales guy, and most 90% of sales guys I'll talk to will never tell me they aspire to be a CEO. And that is just like a red flag in my mind. I want someone, you know, and then some guy will come and say, but actually I aspire to be what you, and that is what you want to hear. You want to hear about someone who has ambition and aspiration. So I love to see those stories. I love to see growth stories.
Fantastic, fantastic. We have two quick questions that I would take. Who has been your role model? I mean, I know you spoke a lot about your mom, and who do you follow for inspiration?
There's not one, I would say, but there are different sets of people who have been role models. I like to look at different individuals and take different things away from them. I'll tell you a couple of people I really like. I love Nandan Nilikani's career. If I have to think about my own, because I think he's contributed tremendously to uh, uh, Infosys, and then also contributed to government with his time. And that's kind of how I would like to see my own career. I currently love two people. Sanjeev Mehta, who is CEO of HUL. I met him through a boardroom session, and he's just warm and human and clear, but he speaks in very simple terms. And he's someone, you know, he knows how to be warm to a CEO, and he knows how to be warm to a young FMCG distributor. And I love that ability that he has. And then I love Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. You know, she's 39, a young woman leader, you know, leading her country through crisis with a lot of boldness and a lot of heart and humanity. You know, some of the things I believe in about communication, telling stories, being honest with your people, I think she emulates that pretty nicely. So these are
Fantastic.
the two, three people I currently really like.
Last question I'll pick up, Radhika, is what are you currently reading?
Oh my God, I read so many books. I read like 50 books a year, and I mostly read fiction. I don't read self-help books. I don't understand them. Um, so make fun of me for that, but I read a lot of fiction, and I read fiction from around the world. So, and I do a lot of, currently I'm reading a book of poetry because I'm learning Urdu. So I'm reading this book of Faiz's poetry in translation. So I'm reading the Urdu and I'm reading the Hindi. So that's what I'm currently reading. But
So
I
is,
read everything,
so,
romantic novels, African script, everything fiction I love.
so is there an author coming up in Radhika Gupta soon?
I want to write a book. I really want to write a book, and I'm hoping in 10 years I will write a book. I hope sooner, but I want to.
Fantastic. So Speaking looks forward to launching that book together with you. Thank you. So fantastic, Radhika. I think we're drawing close to our conversation. Thank you very much for your time. It's been absolute pleasure having spoken to you. You are indeed a warm and a very, very likable leader. Stay that way. Keep inspiring. And thank you very much once again.